Well, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Vineyard, everyone. It's good to see you. How's everybody feeling? Yeah. Yeah, hey, can we just take another 5 seconds and celebrate God for what he did over here to my right? Yeah, it's so encouraging. It's so fun. And to see all the young people taking a step of faith this early in their lives, we're just praying that God will continue to expand their imagination and all that. It's just so fun. I also want to do a real quick celebration. This has kind of nothing to do with this message. Maybe it does. But Pastor Kevin and Pastor Debbie are celebrating 40 years of marriage today. Today. That is quite the accomplishment. So if you're married and you're in the house, keep going, step into it, lean into it. We've been in a series we're calling Risk, and we've been looking at different Bible characters. If you're new in the house, we've been looking at different Bible characters all summer, and we're seeing that a life of faith often involves moments of risk. Moments where we need to step into realities that are beyond what we can see and beyond what we control. And how many of you know that these stories are not so much about extraordinary people in the Bible, but an extraordinary God doing extraordinary things through ordinary people, expanding his extraordinary story. It's just been a lot of fun. If you've not been able to keep up with this, go back to YouTube and check that out. Today we're going to talk about David and Goliath, a very familiar story in the Bible in 1 Samuel, if you want to start to head that direction. David and Goliath, probably one of the most famous stories in all of the Bible, and probably the most misunderstood. So we're going to jump into that story. And this story, you need to know, is not primarily about slaying giants. The story is not so much about you need to be braver, you need to be better, you need to get your act together. This story is more about seeing God through the perspective that David sees God. And that when we begin to see God's bigger story in our lives, when we begin to lean into that bigger story, we develop the courage to take the next faithful step. And we've been learning here at the Vineyard that the way you spell faith at the Vineyard is what? R-I-S-K. Yeah, you've been paying attention, so that's awesome. So that's where we're going to go today. A few years ago, my daughter and I had an opportunity to travel to Mexico. Been there probably 20, 30 times on missions and different vacations, and I thought it'd be fun to take her, just the two of us, to Mexico for a trip, visiting a friend down there who runs a seminary and plants churches. And I thought it'd be great for her to see God at work in a different part of the country, at the same time just spend time with my little girl. It was a blast. And towards the end of the week, we spent some time with our host, and we had dinner. And after dinner, my daughter suggested, hey, why don't we walk from their house to the seminary where we were staying, and it'd be a nice walk. It was a nice night. I thought it was a good idea. I had walked that path before. I was familiar with it. And so we began our walk. The problem is, in this particular part of Mexico, it's Pachuca, Mexico, which is just northeast of Mexico City. About a certain time, pretty much all of the lights turn off unless you have a generator. And it was so dark that you could barely see 10 feet in front of you. So about halfway through our walk, we heard the growl. And my daughter immediately grabs my hand. And within moments later, we see the dog that the growl was attached to. And the dog sees us, and we see the dog. And something you need to know about this part of Mexico is that there are a lot of dogs that are roaming free, and not all of them are friendly. And a moment later, this dog starts to charge us. And within a moment, I have to decide, can I outrun my daughter? Just kidding. But within a moment, my daughter squeezes my hand, and I can barely feel the circulation. I jump in front of her. And then within another moment, that dog comes to a screeching halt and hits a chicken wire that he didn't see and that we didn't see, a chicken wired fence. And he goes from full momentum to a full screeching stop and yelp. And by that time, my daughter is wrapped around me, just panicking. Our hearts are pounding. We were fine. We're alive. We're here today. And we kept walking. Here's what's interesting about this story that we'll never leave. We'll never forget that story for as long as we live. We talk about it to this day. But what is most significant to me was her instinct. It was her impulse. That in that moment, listen, in that moment, she didn't grab a stick to fight the dog. She didn't, in her mind, at least I don't think she did, think, I wonder if I could outrun my dad. Her instinct was to be with her dad. In this moment of danger, in this moment where things were bigger than herself, in this moment where fear was clearly evident, her instinct was, I gotta be close to my dad. My instinct was, I gotta protect my kid. And the question I want to start this conversation off with today is this. When life gets to a place that's bigger than you, where do you go for security? Where do you go for comfort? Where do you turn to when life gets uncertain? Now, I don't know everybody in the room or online today, but I'm certain of this. All of us will have faced or are facing or will face a giant of some size in our lives. It's just inevitable. It may be a financial uncertainty. It may be a physical diagnosis. It may be a broken relationship. All of us are going to face a giant of some size. And the question is, where will your instinctive movement take you? Where will you go? Now, I can't guarantee today that your circumstances are going to change. In fact, they're probably not going to change. But my prayer for you today is that your perspective would change. My prayer for you today is that you'll begin to see the giants in your life, whatever size that they are, in light of a much bigger and grander and greater God, rather than reducing our God within sight of a much bigger giant in your life. And that's the big idea today. The big idea, if you don't get anything else today, the big idea is this: fear will magnify the giants in your life. Fear will magnify the giants in your life, but faith will magnify a greater and grander God in your life, if you will allow him, So, how do we move from fear to that kind of faith? Well, it's not by trying harder. It's not by being braver. It's not by being better, okay? Biblical faith isn't self-confidence. Biblical faith is God confidence. And as we begin to see a greater and grander God at work in your story, you will begin to take courageous steps of faith. And that's what risk is all about. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying the giants are not big. David saw a giant, and it was very, very real. The battle was very, very real. Everything was very, very real. He just saw something bigger than what was right in front of him. And so, as we step into this story, I want to invite you, if you haven't already gotten there, to go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. This would be a good time to pull out that app. If you don't already have it out, you can go to the app and you can hit Weekend and hit the weekend notes. If you don't have the app, you can go to the Google Store or the Apple Store, or you can tap the seat back in front of you. Either way, get there. That'll be the way that you track me. If you just want to go old school, there are some notes in the back on the table. You can feel free to get up. It won't be rude. Grab those, grab a pen, and let's get after it. But I'm going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Israel and the Philistines are at war again. This is a long conflict that has been going for as long as they can remember, but this particular conflict is a defining conflict between Israel and Philistia. And in verse 17, it's kind of a face-off. And I'm going to go ahead and read, and then we'll unpack it together and hopefully get some insights for living as we walk along here. The Philistines, verse 1 through 11. The Philistines now mustered their army for battle. and camped between Soka and Judah and Azekah and Ephes Damim. I'm quite certain I'm butchering all those words. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and the Israelites faced each other on opposite hills and the valley between them. Then, here he is, then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, a bronze coat of mail weighing 125 pounds. He also wore a bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft and his spear was heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, dipped in an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. This guy was stacked. This guy was ready for battle. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted and taunted to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves." I defy the armies of Israel. He is throwing it down. The challenge is in front of them. I defy the armies of Israel. Send me a man who will fight me. And I'm going to stop there. And for you, type A people, it's going to drive you crazy. I'll get to that verse in just a second. So here's the scenario. Here's the lay of the land. They've been fighting for years, but this is the ultimate standoff. Whoever wins this battle wins the war. Whoever wins this battle loses their nation. And Israel is looking at a more sophisticated army. If you were to plot all of those cities on a map, you would see that the Philistines had the military advantage. They controlled the route to Judah. They had the positional advantage. If you look at this, you see Goliath is unbeatable. Any Rocky IV fans in the house? Rocky IV fan, I'm dating myself. This guy is Ivan Drago. He is the Ivan Drago of this day. He is trained. He is well equipped. His military armor is sophisticated. He is unbeatable. He's got more knockouts than anybody. And he is throwing it down. He seems unbeatable. Philistines have the advantage. Goliath seems unbeatable. And now he's laying down the challenge. And actually, the challenge is actually a pretty responsible challenge if you think about it. Because he's saying, hey, rather than all of us go to war, how about your best guy fights our best guy? That's me, by the way. And let's get it on. And whoever wins gets to take all. It's less messy, it's less bloody. So why in the world are the Israelites so afraid? Well, the Philistines have the advantage. Goliath looks unbeatable. Their military is sophisticated. This is getting really personal, and I want to just stop there and pause for a second and take us back to your thing, whatever your thing is, right? When you lay it, the way oftentimes I ask this is, hey, when you're laying in bed at night and there's nothing else to think about, what's the one thing you think about? What's the one thing that makes you anxious? What's the one thing that's bigger than you that you don't know what to do with? What is that thing? What is that thing? Does it seem like it has the advantage on you? Does it seem like it's unbeatable? Does it seem like you don't know what to do? Does it seem like it's just getting personal and you're starting to question yourself? This is where Israel is at. And if you back up a little bit, it kind of surprises me with Israel. If you consider Israel's their history. I wrote some notes down. God defeats Egypt without an army in Exodus 14. God did that. God did that. He brought down the walls of Jericho in Joshua 6. God did that. God came in and kicked butt and took names. Right? Again, chronologically, he gave Gideon the victory with only 300 men in Judges 7. God did that. God made it happen, right? He empowered Samson. As messed up and twisted as Samson was, he just made all sorts of bad choices. God still used him to dominate this same army, the Philistines. God did that. In just a few chapters early in 1 Samuel 7, the Israelites actually dominated the Philistines. So much so that in 1 Samuel 7:12, Samuel sets up a memorial, and the memorial read this way: "Thus far, God has been with us." God did that. Israel had more reason to believe in a bigger God than they did the giant and the Philistines of that day. Are you with me so far? But it was one giant that caused them to just lose their stuff. That's what giants do. That's what problems do. And if we're honest, that's what we do. It's the one thing. Quick story. My wife and I were in Southern California at a favorite seaport town, and I was parallel parking. This is such this is a true story, but I just want to make a point here. For those of you who don't know me, a few years ago I had a nasty, gnarly stage 4 cancer. Wasn't really sure where life was going to take us, and here we are. I'm good, but we I appreciate that. I'm trying to tell a story. And I'm parallel parking. And y'all, I was getting so frustrated because I couldn't make the parallel park. If you ask my wife, she'll say, my husband's the best parallel parker in the world, right? It's really awesome and sexy, okay? And so, but I couldn't make this, and I was getting anxious, and I literally said to her, why am I getting so anxious? God cured me of cancer 5 years ago. That's a big giant, and this little giant that's just getting me all up in my head is driving me nuts. I have more of a reason to believe God's faithfulness, God's history, God's victory in my life than the one giant that's in front of me. But us, like Israel, we see the giant and we begin to lose our perspective. So here's the problem if you're following along in your notes. Fear distorts our perspective and can magnify the giants in our life. Fear distorts our perspective and can magnify the giants in our life. Fear has a short memory. I wrote this note down. Fear fixes our eyes on what is in front of us and causes us to forget the God who has been with us all along. Oh my goodness, if that is so true. So let me just go back to those things that are keeping you up at night. Maybe your giant is the fear of future. Finances, I know that's a very, very real thing. That has been a real thing for us. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe you were rejected a long time ago, and everything that you do in relationships is about overcompensating. Maybe your giant is cancer or some sort of physical diagnosis, and I can't promise that that's going to go away. I can't promise that you're going to be okay. Maybe it's anger. They say hurt people, and maybe you're angry and you're hurting people, or people are hurting you. You know, maybe this is interesting. Maybe the giant is comfort itself, and you're slowly drifting from depending on God because you have been so successful and you have done so well, and there's less of a need to depend on God. Whatever your giant is, fear has a way of making it look bigger than itself. Fear will magnify the giants. I've got this interesting paradox. It's called the wilderness paradox. And it goes like this. You see the words up on the screen. How many of you saw the words, God is nowhere? Few of you. How many of you saw God is now here? A few of you. Yeah, same circumstances, same situation, same order of words, two very different perspectives. Would you agree? God is nowhere, God is now here. Our perspective can change everything. And as we begin to see the giant in front of us, as the thing gets right in front of us, it can become so, fear has a way of magnifying it in so many ways that it gets personal, and we think, God, where are you? God, where are you? I've seen you do it in her life, I've seen you do it in his life, I've seen you do it in their life, I've even seen you do it in my life, but where are you now? and we start to get nervous, and we start to lose our sense of reality. But as we jump in, as we lean into God, we can begin to see a different perspective. Enter David in verse 12. In verse 12, we see David in verse 12 through 26. Now, what do we know about David? We know it's a little bit of backstory. We know that David has been secretly anointed as king. Saul had lost favor with God. The Spirit of God had left Saul through a string of disobedience. And now David has been secretly anointed as king. And nobody really knows about it except just a few people. We know also in these verses, in verse 12, verse 12 through 20, we see that he's a shepherd. We see that he plays the harp. He plays a mean harp. In fact, he's been tapped by Saul's officials to play the harp for Saul because the Spirit of God had left Saul. Saul can kind of get all up in his head and be a little bit tormented. And so one thing that causes him to just relax a little bit, I like classical music. Saul likes David's harp playing. Okay? And so we know that David plays the harp. He's faithful in tending sheep. He's faithful in playing the harp. We know that Jesse's son has sent David to the battlefield, not to be a warrior, but to deliver cheese and bread. To deliver cheese and bread. He delivers cheese and bread to his brothers who are fighting, and some of the leaders in the army. When you look at David at this point in the narrative, forget about what you know about David now. When you look at David at this point in the narrative, you don't think warrior. They're not looking at him and going, "Yo, there's our champion. Finally, we're going to be okay." You don't look at him and think, "This is the Navy SEAL." You look at David and go, "This is the Grubhub guy." Right? This is the Uber Eats guy. Nobody is looking at David and thinking, "Our savior." Nobody's looking at David and saying, "Our rescuer." But David enters the scene, and he sees what everyone else sees. But he sees it differently. He sees the same giant. He sees the same battle. He sees the same anxiety. He sees the same stress. He doesn't deny any of those things at all. He sees it, but from a different perspective. Libby, my daughter, go back to that story. She saw the same dog. She wasn't like, my dad's finally getting too old. He's seeing things. No, she sees the same dog. She sees the same fear, but her instinct and her perspective was, my dad's bigger than that. Whether it was true or not for me in my human state, she thought, my dad is bigger than this. I'll be okay. David walks into this, and he starts to ask questions. He's like, "Yo, what's going on here? What's with all the panic? What's with all the fear?" And I'm adding some narrative here, but he's saying, "Do you guys not remember where we've been? Do you not remember what God did?" And in verse 26, there's a line of questioning that David offers that I think is just absolutely incredible. This is what he says. "Who is this pagan Philistine anyways that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" David wasn't concerned about the giant. He didn't deny the giant, but he wasn't concerned about the giant because he knew he had a bigger God at work and at play. There was a bigger story. Here's the lesson as you're following along. Faith will magnify God's greatness, helping us see him more clearly. Faith magnifies God's greatness, helping us see him more clearly. Oftentimes I'll go for a run. Running for me is a way to kind of get my headspace, and my wife knows that if I'm getting all up in my headspace, that I need to go for a run because she knows the circumstances that I'm dealing with, whether it's a finance, whether it's a physical, whether it's a relational, whether it's a work thing. She knows that those circumstances aren't necessarily going to go away, but my husband needs a perspective change, so I'll go for a run, and I may start with some anxiety on the front end of the run, but by the end of the run, I'm just like, all right, God's got this. I don't know how he's going to do it, but God's going to make it happen. I don't know how he's going to play this out, but God's going to make it happen. It's a perspective change. I may go from God is nowhere, but by the end of that run, I'm like, God is now here. And here's the twist to this story. my run, my whatever I'm dealing with, that thing that keeps me up at night, that thing that keeps you up at night, that's not really the subject of the story. In fact, you're not the subject of the story, and neither am I. In fact, this story, David and Goliath, is not even really about David or Goliath. The twist in the story, if you're following along in your notes, is that God is the hero of the story. God is the hero of the story, not David, not Goliath. And so when David says, who is this pagan Philistine anyways that he's allowed to defy the armies of God, David understands that Goliath isn't simply mocking Israel. He's defying God. He's attacking God's character. He's attacking God's reputation. And do you know that reputation and character are two different things? Reputation is about what other people think of God. Glory is about who God actually is. And he's saying, you are defying our covenantal God, the God who rescues us, the God who redeems us, the God who comes to our aid, the God who gives us all the things that we give, that we need in our lives to thrive, to succeed. You're defying that God. And if you were talking in 2026 language, the verse 26 would translate this way: oh, no, you did not. That's what he's saying. And this is why he was having such a hard time relating to his brothers. His brothers are like, you're just full of pride. And then Saul was like, listen, you need armor. David's like, not only are you defying the armies of God, but I'll go fight them. I got this. I'll do this. Right? And Saul's like, you need the armor. He's like, I don't need the armor. He saw things with a different perspective. David's greatest concern in that moment was God's glory instead of his comfort. As you're following along in your notes, when our greatest concern becomes God's glory, his reputation, that God's name be exalted, that God be seated on the throne, when our greatest concern is that, in verses 32 through 47, we see a posture that we can follow as an example. When we say, God, I want what you want. God, I want your name to be exalted. God, I want your reputation to be increased. God, when I want what you want rather than what I want, God, I need you to show up and show off in my life. When we have that kind of posture, we see that it produces a confident heart. We see that it produces a confident heart. David is like, I will go to battle. And Saul's like, no, kid, this is too big for you. And he says in verse 37, listen, the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. I don't know how God's going to do it. I don't know when he's going to do it, but he's going to do it. God is going to show up in a way that's going to blow our minds if we will open our perspective to that. We also see that it produces a resourceful faith. David rejects all the armor that Saul puts on him. You know how the story goes. And he's like, I can't put my confidence in that. I got to put my confidence in God. I got to look around at the resources God has given me. I got to be creative. I got to be a little bit innovative. God, you got to give me wisdom for this. But I'm going to trust that what God has given me is enough to make it through here. 1 Peter, I should have put this on the notes. 1 Peter talks about how God has given us everything that pertains to life and godliness. You have everything that you need to go through whatever it is that you're going through. As I'm laying there in a hospital bed, I've got the peace, I've got the patience, I've got the self-control, I've got the composure that God has given me. Does that mean you're not going to have bad days? Does that mean things might not work out the way you think? It may be, but you have everything that you need that pertains to life and godliness so that you can be the person that you need to be in those circumstances. We see also that it produces a promised, focused perspective. Listen to David as he finally gets on the battlefield. And Goliath is just like, what? Are you for real right now? You're sending this guy? You're sending this like junior hire to fight this battle? And David doesn't even care. He has this perspective. He has this confidence. He has this resolve. And this is what he says. This is what he said. David replied to the Philistine, you have come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Like you busted up his name, and now you're in. Imagine this kid, right? You know the story. You know the story. Today, the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. This is PG-13, y'all. And then I will give the dead, check this out, I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Do you catch that part? He's reclaiming the covenantal reputation, the God that saves, the God who has rescued. His goal is that God's name be magnified, and everybody assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with a sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us, just like he did during the Exodus, just like he did with Gideon, just like he did with them. He's going to do it again. So bring it. Bring your best. Bring your sophistication. Bring it. Let's go. And you guys know the story. One stone, one victory, one defeated enemy. But listen, if that's all that we see in this story, and that's an awesome story, that's an awesome lesson. If that's all that we see, then we're missing the entirety of the story. Because what we see here is this, that like David was the representative, David was the champion. This word champion, Goliath was described as a champion, David was not, but that's what he actually was. A champion, literally, in the original language says, one that goes between. So David steps onto the field, and he's not only the champion, but he's the one that goes between. He's actually Israel's representative. In the same way, if you find yourself, in court, you hire an attorney, and you hope that that attorney, if she wins, you win. If she loses, you lose. David is the representative of Israel. And like David, the representative of Israel, he fought the battle for Israel. If he wins, Israel wins. If he loses, Israel loses. He steps in, and he's the representative for Israel. In the same way, I think you know where I'm going with this. Jesus is the greater champion. Jesus has stepped in, and he has fought that battle that you're wrestling with. Every one of these stories that you've been learning about this summer all point to a greater God at work, and they all point to a greater story in the person of Jesus Christ. Listen, I want to land the plane with this illustration. I'm going to throw an illustration up on the screen. We've got just a couple of minutes. What's the first thing you see? Yell it out. Blue circle, blue dot. That's good. Goliath was this blue dot for Israel. First thing they saw, it's giant, it's huge. Go to the next slide, Jeremy. Now what do you see? Right, it's not a trick question. It's a smaller circle, it's a smaller dot. Okay? Now go to the next slide, Jeremy. What do you see? Wait, I just heard it. What'd you say? White space. How many of you during the first picture saw the white space? Let me land the plane really quickly. Sometimes we get so focused on what's right in front of us that we forget and we neglect and we just don't see the greater, the wider space of God's grace at work in your life. We just don't see it because it's right in front of us. Fear will magnify the giants in your life. But if we can just step back, go for a run or whatever it is that you need to do to get your perspective on and allow yourself to see the greater and wider space of God's grace at life. Now, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying the blue dot doesn't exist. Goliath and this conflict was very much real, and the fear was very much real. And your issue, the thing that's keeping you up at night, it's real. And I can't promise that it's going to get sorted out today or tomorrow or even ever. But I can promise that there's a perspective that's available to you in a relationship with Jesus Christ. I can promise that. So would you bow with me? I want to take a moment to spend some time with God. And I just want to throw a challenge down. There's actually one prayer that works for all of us. But I want to talk to the person on the screen or in this room that has never made a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Like everything that I'm talking about, you're like, yep, the blue dot is real. Yep, the thing is real. I don't know what to do with it. I've lost my perspective. It's eating away at me. I'm anxious. I'm frustrated. I'm confused. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. I'm broken. It has the advantage on me. It's getting personal. Can I just invite you? There's so much scripture that talks about the grace and the comfort and the peace and the patience that God will offer us through the ministry of his Holy Spirit by way of a relationship with Jesus. And if you've never said yes to Jesus, here's the prayer. It's not the last prayer, it's the first prayer. God, I give you my life. I want everything that Pastor Paul's talking about. God, I give you my life. For all of us, for everybody else in the room and online, guess what? That prayer is the exact same prayer. When you get up tomorrow morning, when you wake up, man, what a great prayer to just say. And I do this every morning. God, I give you my life. God, have your way in my life. God, I need you to be on the throne of my life, not those giants. God, I need you to put those giants in their rightful place. God, have your way in me. Show up and show off in my life. And be glorified, God. Be the God that you promised. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys.